I didn't realize something was wrong until I started censoring my thoughts before speaking. Not because I was afraid of arguing, but because I already knew how the conversation would end. We'd been married for 10 years. People described us as calm, balanced, almost boring in a good way. We didn't fight loudly. We discussed things. Or at least that's what I told myself. Looking back, most of those discussions ended with me agreeing that I was wrong to feel how I felt. At the time, I thought that meant maturity. I didn't understand it was conditioning. She had a way of staying reasonable no matter what. If I was upset, she stayed calm. If I raised a concern, she'd nod patiently and ask why I was interpreting things so negatively. She rarely denied facts. She reframed them. Everything became about perspective. Her favorite phrase was, "That's not how I experienced it." After enough repetitions, I stopped trusting my own experience altogether. Friends admired how composed she was. I admired it too, until I realized her calm always came at the cost of my certainty. The cheating didn't come with red flags. No secret phone, no late nights. It came disguised as honesty. She started talking about a coworker more often, not romantically, thoughtfully, how insightful he was, how he really listened. She'd say things like, "It's nice to have conversations without emotional weight." I didn't question it. When I finally did, she laughed gently and asked if I was feeling insecure. That word landed hard. Insecure. I apologized for even bringing it up. I didn't know that apology would be remembered later as evidence. I found out by accident. I was using her tablet to order something online when a notification popped up. Not explicit, just intimate, familiar, the kind of message that assumes history. My chest tightened, but I still tried to rationalize it. When I showed it to her, she didn't deny it. She sighed and said she'd been meaning to talk to me, that what she had with him wasn't cheating. It was emotional alignment. She said labels were harmful, that what mattered was intent. Her intent, apparently, had been pure. The confrontation felt surreal. I was shaking, trying to explain why this hurt. She listened, nodded, then calmly explained why my reaction made sense, but was misplaced. She said I was projecting my fears onto her actions, that my pain didn't mean she'd done something wrong. She asked me to consider how hard it was for her to finally feel understood by someone. I remember thinking, when did this conversation stop being about what she did and start being about why I shouldn't feel hurt by it? The days after that conversation blurred together. She acted relieved, almost lighter, as if finally being honest had freed her from something heavy. I felt the opposite. Everything felt fragile. I kept replaying her words, trying to find a place where my feelings were allowed to exist without being explained away. Whenever I brought it up, she'd say we'd already talked about it, and that reopening it was unhealthy. She started using phrases like ruminating and emotional spirals. I didn't know when she'd learned this language, only that it worked. Each time I questioned her, I walked away feeling like I'd failed some invisible test. The first real twist came when I realized she'd been preparing for this moment. Not legally or financially, emotionally. She'd already told her sister that our marriage had been struggling for years. She told a close friend that I was sensitive and prone to misinterpreting things. When those people checked in on me, it wasn't concern, it was assessment. I felt like I'd stepped into a version of events where I was already unstable, and any pain I showed only confirmed it. I wasn't just reacting late. I was reacting into a narrative that had already been written. I asked if she loved him. She paused, then said love was too simple a word for what she felt. She said it didn't take away from what we had, that emotions weren't finite. When I said that didn't make sense to me, she said I was stuck in old frameworks, that maybe my discomfort came from fear, not reality. I started questioning whether my values were outdated, whether expecting exclusivity was unreasonable. That doubt scared me more than the affair itself. I'd never questioned my sense of right and wrong before. Another twist surfaced quietly. I noticed she was still messaging him, not constantly, but carefully. When I pointed it out, she accused me of monitoring her, said trust couldn't grow under surveillance. She reminded me that she'd been honest now, and that continuing to question her showed I wasn't ready to heal. That's when it clicked. Honesty, to her, wasn't about transparency. It was about control. She decided when the truth was allowed to exist, and when it wasn't. I stopped engaging after that. I answered neutrally. I stopped explaining my emotions. The shift was immediate. Her calm slipped. She accused me of being distant, of punishing her with silence. The same behavior she praised as measured before were suddenly framed as cold and unfair. Watching that switch flip was unsettling and clarifying. I realized then that my role in this relationship had never been to be understood. It had been to stay predictable. And the moment I stopped being predictable, everything started to fall apart. Leaving didn't come with a dramatic breaking point. It came with exhaustion. I woke up one morning and realized I was more tired of explaining myself than I was afraid of being alone. When I told her I needed space, she said I was abandoning her when she was being vulnerable. When I said I needed clarity, she said clarity was an illusion people used to avoid growth. Every request I made was turned into a flaw I needed to work on. I started sleeping in the guest room, not out of anger, but because I needed somewhere my thoughts didn't immediately feel wrong. The messages started arriving in waves. Some were warm, reflective, almost loving. Others were sharp and disappointed. She said she didn't recognize me anymore, that I'd changed. She wasn't wrong, but not in the way she meant. Friends I trusted finally heard the full story. A few admitted they'd always felt something was off, but couldn't name it. One friend said quietly, "You've been walking on eggshells for years." Hearing it out loud felt like permission to stop pretending everything was fine. Therapy gave me language for things I'd felt, but never named. I talked about the affair, yes, but more about the way conversations always ended with me doubting myself. My therapist pointed out how often I described myself using her words. Insecure, reactive, difficult. When asked if I felt that way outside the relationship, I didn't. That realization hit hard. It meant I wasn't broken. I'd been adapting. Grief followed, not just a marriage, but for how long I'd silenced myself to keep things calm. When we finally talked about separating, it was strangely calm. She said she hoped one day I'd understand what she'd been trying to show me, that she wished I were more open-minded. I didn't argue. I told her I needed a relationship where honesty didn't require translation, where my emotions weren't treated like problems to be solved. She looked disappointed, like I'd failed to grasp an important lesson. For the first time, that disappointment didn't move me. If you're reading this and something in your relationship feels confusing rather than comforting, pay attention, especially if your feelings are constantly being reframed or corrected. Love shouldn't require you to disappear to keep things peaceful. Leaving wasn't empowering in a cinematic way. It was quiet, frightening, and necessary. I didn't walk away because I stopped loving her. I walked away because I started trusting myself again. And if clarity feels like a threat to your relationship, that might be the clearest answer you're going to get.